Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well on this Monday. Had a fantastic weekend. We all know that BYU basketball enjoyed it very highly. But the bigger picture is that BYU is really starting to get some interesting, I don't want to say notoriety because it's kind of negative connotation. Some acclaim is probably the best term about this when it comes to their work in the NIL sphere. Now, a lot of this stems originally, remember, from the recruitment and ultimately the commitment and signing of AJ Dybantsa. When he signed with BYU, there were so many people saying, wow, BYU, what are they doing? They're injecting themselves into the national conversation. And I, for one, was like, yes, thank goodness they are. The biggest thing for BYU is they have got a collection of boosters, and it's deep. I couldn't even begin to guess how many of these deep-pocketed boosters BYU's got, but they are very willing to invest in BYU sports, most importantly, BYU football and BYU basketball. As I mentioned, the Dybantsa signing obviously garnered headlines. That number that BYU reportedly is paying him to come and play next year has ranged from $4 million to $7 million. Now, the latest reports from Myron Medcalf of ESPN was $8.5 million. No matter what, it's money well invested, because what a guy like AJ Dybantsa is going to bring to BYU with his just acclaim that he's getting for he's a Nike athlete. They've got legitimate ads on Nike's app and Nike.com for AJ Dybantsa. He's going to have his own signature line, a signature shoe before too long. All of that is out there for him. And that type of fame and the eyeballs it's going to draw to BYU, yeah, it's going to pay back in spades what BYU's paying to get him on campus. But the bigger point to be made here is it's extending over to BYU football as well. I talked, this goes back, it's about a week ago. We talked about the recruitment of Ryder Lyons. Now, many of you know Ryder Lyons, Folsom High School stud quarterback, a 5-star prospect, the number 2 quarterback in the 2026 recruiting cycle. BYU is one of his finalists, but we're talking some of the biggest of the big schools out there want this kid to sign with them, and BYU's right there in the mix with him. 24/7 Sports put out another article, has a very interesting note on this. That's what prompted me to talk about this, and it says that Lions, it seems to be in no rush, is adding some official visits this offseason. It says USC has been trending on the crystal ball and is outright leader for a while, but things get interesting on that front very soon. More on that shortly. Lions is looking at Oregon. Dan Lanning and his staff would love to secure Lions' commitment, especially with the fact that he'll take a mission trip. It's just a mission, let's be very clear, for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and be a part of the 2027 class. I also keep an eye on Ohio State, Michigan, and Ole Miss as well. They are potential destinations for Lions official visits. The dark horse, though, BYU. And I say this, the Cougars have done an excellent job of recruiting him, and in the NIL era, they're doing a very good job of taking care of their top priorities. Don't sleep on Kalani Sitake and his staff. Folks, the fun part is BYU is in the fight here. I have it down to, if I were to ask me, okay, who are the leaders for a guy like Ryder Lyons? I say it's a 3-horse race right now between USC, Oregon, and BYU. Those 3 are leading the race right now, and they are the 3 that Ryder Lyons has publicly acknowledged that he will officially visit at some point. He is a guy that is a transformational type quarterback. Yes, he is mission bound. He's saying he's going on a 1-year mission. His brother spent about 14 months in Norway. Speaking of Walker Lyons, who is now at USC, he was a 4-star tight end prospect out of Folsom. BYU was in the mix for him as well, but ultimately opted to go to USC, and that's why the Trojans have long been thought to be the favorites for Ryder. But the nice part is BYU is shooting their shot. They are absolutely in the hunt here. And they mentioned Ohio State. They mentioned a program like a Michigan or an Ole Miss. They're on the outside looking in right now. I think it's a 3-horse race for Ryder Lyons. And as they mentioned here, and in the NIL era, they, speaking of Brigham Young University, are doing a very good job of taking care of their top priorities. You know who a top priority in the 2026 class, maybe the top priority in the 2026 recruiting cycle? Yeah, it's that guy right there, Ryder Lyons. He is the type of quarterback that could be the crown jewel for BYU's 2026 recruiting class, which has got a lot of good talent in it, and more importantly, has a lot of good options for BYU to add in the upcoming months leading up to the early signing window this December, and obviously early on into next year when National Signing Day comes around. But if you can get a guy like Ryder Lyons on board, you're going to have other top shelf, top flight talent that is going to say, hey, if he's picking BYU, I may want to give a second look to the Cougars. And it comes down to NIL. And there's a lot of fan bases out there. There's one 40 miles north of here that likes to say you can buy anything with money when it comes to BYU. You know what? That's just jealousy speaking, because BYU has got a booster group and, more importantly, a collective. Speaking of the Royal Blue Collective, shout out to Mark Comer and the folks over at the Royal Blue. They have been doing yeoman's work to get BYU competitive on a national stage, and it's paying off. When writers put this into stories like this for 24/7 Sports, I think this one was by Tom Loy, who's one of their lead recruiting analysts. It doesn't come from nowhere. They know what BYU is capable of with NIL. And now that NIL is, to use that term we talk about, above board, for years, there were the stories of bagmen in the SEC and all the money that they could offer to these prospects. And it was seedy, and it was just kind of unsightly. It was dirty. BYU was not about to get into the mud. And I know that some of you out there would have liked to have seen them done that. But now the NIL is allowing you to get in the race for any prospect and offer up whatever amount of money they're interested in. And it allows BYU to get in the mix on the recruiting front here. Yeah, it is going to make them a force. We're seeing guys like Malachi Lee, the number one prospect out of Hawaii. He's got BYU among his final six. Ely, I forget what his last name is, out of Orange Lutheran High School down there in Southern California. He has got blue blood after blue blood in his final seven, but one of those seven, Brigham Young University. BYU's ability to really impact the recruitment of these athletes, most notably Ryder Lyons, when it comes to NIL, it's an absolute game changer. And I, for one, I'm all on board with BYU trying and getting the best athletes they can on campus. We saw them break through with a really masterful 11-2 season this past year with a roster chock full of mainly 3-star athletes. What could BYU do as they start to sprinkle in some 4, and in the case of Ryder Lyons, 5-star athletes? Sure seems like the proverbial moon is the ceiling. What am I trying to say? It was the Michael Jordan. The roof is the ceiling. That's what I'm trying to use. And everything's there for BYU. Much like the BYU basketball program, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and everything to play for, was everything for BYU to chase when it comes to the NIL sphere. And they're getting noticed nationally, and it's fun to watch because it's causing some consternation from some other top shelf programs, and BYU could find themselves breaking into that top flight if all goes well. And it will come down to essentially BYU remaining very competitive on the NIL front.